I am Maggie Olson, founder of Nova Chief of Staff. We are going to get right into our Nova chat here in a minute, and we're going to hear from Jake from our Offsite.com sponsor as well. But first, let me share a little bit about Nova. Nova Chief of Staff is the premier destination for Chief of Staff development and education. We launched Chief of Staff, our Nova Chief of Staff certification course about 20 months ago. And we are just a few enrollments away from 1,000 students across 30 countries, which is really exciting. If you want to learn more, there's a couple things you can do. You can check out our syllabus. We'll pop that into the chat box. And you can also book a call with the lovely Christina on our team if you just want to chat about if the course is right for you for like quick 10 or 15 minutes, super easy. We'll put that link in the chat too. All right. Also, our course price is $18.50. So know that on this call, we are offering a discount code for $150 off, and that'll be valid for about 30 days. So that link will also be popped into the chat. It's Hot Takes 150. That's the discount code. So if you want to enroll, use that for a little bit of a discount. Finally, we haven't really announced this yet, but this is a good time to do so. We have recently launched something that we're calling kind of the Nova Promise, which essentially is us trying to offer as much as we can a level playing field across our students and our prospective students, which means if you're from a nonprofit, you work in government, you're from an emerging country or market, or you need financial assistance, all you need to do is email us, and we would love to work something out with you. So we believe in a level playing field, and we'd love to honor that for you. So feel free to send us an email if you'd like, hello@novachiefofstaff.com. All right. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jake from Offsite, and he's going to give a little intro. We appreciate Offsite so much because we're able to do these events for free. So please listen up for just a couple minutes, and then we'll dive into the Nova Chat.
Hey everyone, my name's Jake. I'm the head of sales at Offsite.com. Prior to being head of sales, though, I actually was a chief of staff myself. It was my favorite job, one of my hardest jobs, and I was actually working on a really cool nuclear fusion startup, which is very funny because my actual degree was in music education. So the first ever offsite I planned was band camp for about 250 middle schoolers. And let me tell you that it's way harder than anything we've done at Offsite. At Offsite, our whole goal is save you time, save you money, and save you stress in planning your offsites, but also make sure that your team has a meaningful experience when they're at the offsite. So we take care of everything from helping you figure out where you're going to go, what you're going to do, what you're going to eat, but even down to what you're going to discuss. It really is a level of a partner to a chief of staff or an EA, more so than just another admin for you to manage. In addition to our concierge service, we also do have a marketplace of resources at offsite.com. Just create login, and that'll be in the chat later today. From there, what you could do is you can log in and get access to our curated marketplace where we have discounts of anywhere from 20 to 40% off of typical room rates. Then you can really speed up the group booking process. That's really good for groups under 100 people or so. If you're more than 100, I definitely recommend our concierge service. Either way, happy to help answer any questions regarding Offsite or being a chief of staff. Feel free to email me, jake@offsite.com. Thanks, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Jake. We're so happy to have you as Nova's exclusive sponsorship partner. It's great. Okay, cool. Well, with that, you all may know Clara, but let's introduce Clara anyway. Clara Ma is the founder and CEO of Ask a Chief of Staff, the premier executive search and career development platform dedicated to elevating the chief of staff profession and supporting executives in building high-functioning leadership teams. A former chief of staff at Hugging Face, Clara leveraged her experience to bridging the gap between talent, leadership, and career growth in this critical but often misunderstood role. If you're not following Clara on LinkedIn, follow Clara. She's amazing. We partner a lot, and it's just so great to have a partner like Clara for me. So thanks, Clara, for being you. With that, I'm also going to introduce Christina. So you saw her on camera. We wanted you to kind of just see who the voice was behind the moderator for this chat. I'm going to introduce Christina here. So let's see. Christina is going to be moderating the Q&A portion of the Nova Chat today, which is basically she's going to fire questions to us, and Clara and I are going to share our hot takes. It'll be fun. We've never done this before. Christina is a Nova graduate and was my second full-time hire at Nova. She celebrated her 1-year anniversary with Nova last week and was originally hired as my head of content. However, with Nova's rapid growth, we've leveraged her generalist skill set and over 20 years of experience in leading event roles to our advantage. advantage. So her passion for all things Nova and the chief of staff role is truly palpable. Anybody that knows Christina knows this. And I'm thrilled to have her now deeply involved in Nova's student experience and across our whole company operations. So Christina's incredible. If you're interested in learning more about Nova, again, you can book a discovery call with Christina. Link is in the chat. All right. With that, we're going to get started here. We're going to dive right in to our hot takes. Christina, do you want to take it from here?
I sure can. Can you hear me okay? Great.
Yep.
Okay. So let's start by getting grounded in how each of you defines the chief of staff role. It's one of the most versatile and misunderstood titles out there. Maggie, I'll start with you. How do you define the role, and how do you see it overlapping or diverging from titles like COO or EA?
Okay, I know Clara's definition's a lot faster, so bear with me here, but my definition of the chief of staff role is essentially a business leader's right hand, strategic thought partner, focused on executing, organizing, and prioritizing the leader's most important initiatives and driving transparency and alignment across the executive's leadership team. A chief of staff truly exists to maximize the leader's time and exponentially increase their impact and fills gaps all along the way. The second part of your question, I really love to share the difference between like chief of staff and COO or a chief marketing officer, as the chief of staff role and the executive assistant role truly exist for that human, for that business leader. They are aligning their team. They're building back office functionality and processes and systems. They are ensuring the leader's prepared for everything they walk into. They are first and foremost doing everything they can to support that leader. And then, of course, they're touching the business as a whole, right? But chief marketing officer, chief operating officer, all the other chiefs, most of all the other business functions exist for the business, for the company. I'll pause there.
Okay, Clara, you're up.
Amazing. Thanks, Christina. And Maggie, love that definition. So I like to use a very simple 3-word acronym when it comes to the chief of staff role. I know Maggie's super familiar with me using this acronym all the time, but I like to say that a chief of staff works on 3 main things: COS, culture, operations, and strategy, all in support of their principal. So usually their executive, a CEO, or anybody else who's leading some sort of function at a company. So if there's anything I can leave you with today, if anybody ever asks you, what do you do as a chief of staff, you can point to these 3 buckets: culture, operations, and strategy. And hopefully that can encompass a lot of the things that you're working on, as opposed to pointing to specific projects that you might be working on at any given time. Wanted to just piggyback off of what Maggie said about the differences between a EA, a chief of staff, and a COO or any other C-suite leader. EAs, we like to say, are more tactical in nature versus chiefs of staff are more strategic in nature. That's the main distinction. Not to say that if you're an EA and you are working on more strategic things, that does exist as well, but maybe it's time to ask for a title change if you are working on so much strategy work. And then what Maggie said about chiefs of staff exist. So that is definitely the main mandate of a chief of staff, is how can they make their principal most effective in their principal's zone of genius? How can they be best spending their time efficiently and in the most high impact way? And a chief of staff will clear the way for them to do so. Whereas a COO is focused on serving the organization. So they are focused on how to make the organization more efficient, how to make the organization more impactful. And while a lot of those top level mandates can feel very similar, because obviously if your CEO's priorities are for your business to be successful and the COO is as well, they will feel very aligned, and maybe there's some overlap at certain stages of companies. But as a company gets larger, you'll see those distinctions be a little bit more separated out.
Great. Okay, so we're going to dive into some new questions here. It's time for some rapid fire. We're going to call this thumbs up or thumbs down. So here's how it's going to work. I'll read a statement, count to 3, and then Maggie and Clara will both give us a visual. Thumbs up if they agree, thumbs down if they don't. No explanations just yet, ladies. We'll circle back to these later for deeper discussion. You ready? All right,
Ready.
let's go. First one. The chief of staff title is becoming meaningless and diluted. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Being a former EA hurts your credibility when positioning yourself into a chief of staff role. 1, 2, 3. A chief of staff is a 24/7 job. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Chiefs of staff are expected to be yes people to their CEO. 1, 2, 3. Okay. A chief of staff cannot be truly effective without a team to support them. 1, 2, 3. A chief of staff's success depends on the CEO's leadership style. 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is the last rapid fire. Joining chief of staff communities and educational opportunities helps your chances of landing the role. 1, 2, 3. Great. Okay, let's dive deeper into those questions and bring in some thoughtful context for the viewers here. Clara, let's start with you, circling back to that first statement. The chief of staff title is becoming meaningless and diluted.
Okay, I could not disagree with this one enough. I think Maggie and I were both aligned on this one. I don't think that's the case at all. And just for some context, I mean, I don't think the chief of staff role has been in the spotlight as much as it is right now, than let's say a decade ago. Yes, this role has obviously existed in government and politics for a very long time, but in the corporate world, it's still relatively nascent. And I like to make the comparison that chief of staff today, this title is going through a very similar transition as what product manager was going through about 10 to 15 years ago. If you told someone you were a product manager, almost 20 years ago, they'd be like, what does that mean? What does it mean to manage a product? Things like that. But now there's entire philosophies around product management. There are different types of product managers. There's even businesses, right, built on the education of a product manager, and you can get certifications. And so the chief of staff role, I think, is going through that evolution right now. And so instead of dilution, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding around the role, which is what, Maggie and I both aim to do, is to bring more clarity and transparency to the role. So could not disagree with this enough. I think the role is only getting more and more important in the C-suite. And my goal, of course, with Ask a Chief of Staff, and I know Maggie's aligned with this too, is that we think every executive could use a chief of staff. And so if we believe that that's the case, then the role is only going to get more and more important as the years are to come.
Maggie, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, right? Because the chief of staff role is in the spotlight. So there's a lot of people talking about it. And it feels like it's in the spotlight for us because it's our main job. But it's still like wildly growing in awareness. That I think that's probably Clara and my both like top 3 or 5 initiatives, right? It's like awareness of the chief of staff role. What's interesting is that there are so many different forms and functions and characters, almost to the warm-up question of the chief of staff role. And I don't think that dilutes it at all. I think if anything, it's just adding more to the conversation. And Claire brought up a lot of good points. Some don't want to repeat all of hers, but I absolutely don't think that it's becoming meaningless or diluted at all.
Okay, next question. Maggie, please explain your thoughts on this topic. Does being a former EA hurt your credibility when positioning yourself into a chief of staff role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many places and avenues we can go with this question. But it's an environment question too. If you are already in the back office for your leader as an executive assistant and you're a trusted partner and you're taking on more strategic projects and you're becoming kind of like that trusted voice that maybe your executive bounces things off of, the leadership team, you have the buy-in from the leadership team, and you're an EA and you've worked to position yourself into a higher level role like chief of staff, it's only going to help you. Now, if you are going out to a company that you don't know, to people you don't know, and you've never been a chief of staff, and maybe you have been an EA, that could make it harder for you to land a chief of staff role. But, I always talk about it's going to be easier to land a chief of staff role with somebody that you know or within your current environment, because it's such a high trust role. But absolutely, I think that there are so many advantages for executive assistants being in the environment that they're currently in to potentially moving into higher level positions, whatever that position might be within that environment. And it's usually the confidence to do it versus the external environmental factors that are the barrier there.
Great. Clara, what's your take?
Yeah, for me, I know that chiefs of staff can come from all sorts of different backgrounds. I don't think one background makes you a better or more effective chief of staff. At the end of the day, it's the leader that you're supporting and the strengths that you're bringing to the table. And so, depending on who your leader is, having an EA background could be really helpful. And in other cases, it might not be, right? There are certain roles that I definitely would not have been able to take on given that I was transitioning into a chief of staff role. I come from a heavier operations background. And for chief of staff roles that need more financial analysis or SQL or Excel experience, I wouldn't be a fit for that role. And so I don't think it dilutes it at all. I think what Maggie said about confidence, right? And also knowing what your narrative is and why you want to step into the position is going to make you a stronger candidate in any sort of setting. Doesn't matter if you're going for a chief of staff role or otherwise. And so if you are an EA right now and you're looking to transition into a chief of staff role, I say go for it and figure out what are the skill sets you need to build to become a more effective chief of staff and to whom. I think that is the biggest question, is that who do you want to be a chief of staff to? That's going to require a different kind of skill set, a different kind of even personality sometimes for different leaders. And so if you're able to pull out those types of things and highlight them in your story as you pitch yourself for chief of staff roles, that is going to be the best thing that you can do, and not worry so much about what necessarily titles you've had in your past.
Yeah. Yeah. And telling your story via, your resume as well. Like if your whole resume reads as EA experience and you're leaving a lot on the table in terms of the additional responsibility you've taken on or the strategic projects you've taken on or those chief of staff, I guess like personas and leadership positioning that you've been in, then you're absolutely not positioning yourself the way you should. So position yourself for the role that you are looking to get into in the best way you can based on your past experience. And if your role reads like an EA and you're going for a chief of staff role, that's going to be harder in an external environment for sure.
Okay, you two were split on this one. Clara, I'm going to start with you. Is chief of staff a 24/7 job?
Yeah, I'm gonna say no here. And the reason why I say so is that I think it can feel like one and it can be one, but it shouldn't. It really shouldn't be a 24/7 job. I mean, any job that you have to do 24/7 will burn you out and you're not going to be as effective as you could be, right? And so I think that many people mistake being a chief of staff with having to be online all the time with your executive, kind of be at their beck and call. And the most effective chiefs of staff, I think, set clear boundaries. There are a lot of parents that come to me and say, I don't know if I can be a chief of staff. Like I'm a parent, I have to have school pickup and things like that. And I tell them, who is your principal? Does your principal share your values? Because you would want to work with somebody who does. And my principal we set really clear boundaries up at the front of us working together. And he said, I don't do very much in my evenings sometimes. And so I will send you, a message maybe at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. My expectation is for you to answer during business hours, right? And that it was a very clear distinction because I've 100% worked at startups where the expectation is for you to be online all the time. And it was really stressful and it was not good for my mental health. It was not good for my physical health, all of that. I would go to sleep worried that I would be missing a Slack message. And so setting those boundaries up front with my principal was super, super helpful. I was like, hey, look, like I like to go to the gym every day from 5 to 6. So during that hour, I'm probably going to be unreachable. If there's going to be something that happens within that time frame, like let's make sure we've prepped ahead of time, or I know that that's time that I need to set aside for you. And so that I think is really important. One thing that I think surprises a lot of people during my time as a chief of staff was that I did not have Slack on my phone, which I think people were like, how is that possible, right? And again, because I worked in an industry where we were not doing life or death, we didn't work in rocket science or brain surgery, and so I wanted to draw a clear distinction. I said, look, my phone is my personal life, and Slack is business life. I'll have it open on my laptop. You will have access to me, 9 to 6 every single day. Like, I will be very responsive then. But outside of that, like, I will not put Slack on my phone to draw a boundary. And so the boundary piece, I think, is as important of a thing to set expectations with your principal about, so that you don't end up working a 24/7 job and feeling like I'm giving up, the next however many years of my life. And it's not going to set you up for success. It's not going to set your principal up for success either.
Oh, love how thorough that was. Maggie, what do you think?
I'm gonna agree with everything Clara said, even though I had a different thumbs up. But here's why I said that it is a 24/7 job. Because being a founder is a 24/7 job. And I'm a balanced founder. And I think that's probably pretty unique, but you can find both. So here's kind of what I'm thinking about with this. Being a founder is a 24/7 job. Being a business owner, business leader, even if you're a VP of a giant organization, but you're not the CEO, it's, unfortunately, it's a 24/7 job. And what I mean by that is major catastrophes that happen, major employee things that happen, like you are looped in at any time of the day. And you have to be, there has to be somebody available for those things. And unfortunately, it is going to be that executive. Now, I say I'm a balanced founder. I've been working now for 2 decades, and I've spent a lot of time on my mental health, and I have a little 2-year-old, and I know what I need to be happy. And so with that, like to a lot of Clara's points here, I've built my working life as a founder around all of these things. Like Clara said, like I have time in the morning for the gym and the outside time, like just for myself. I've got time in the morning for my little guy and my husband. That's great. That's family time. And then I go into work time, in that kind of middle big chunk of the day because of those hours. And then I, have my little guy at night. My husband works evenings, so that's fun. And then because of this, I'm happy to work at a coffee shop for a few hours on the weekend, one day here and there, sometimes both if I have to. We're leading up to a conference, working a lot more right now. It's just the give and take, but staying in touch with myself and my boundaries. Okay. So with that, as a chief of staff, you are that leader's right hand. If their job is 24/7, I believe your job is too, but I also believe it's your job to set the boundaries. To Clara's point, I'm not, you could say something like, I'm not going to be online like generally after 6. So if you need something, just call. You're still available. You're still supporting this maybe 24/7 need. But you're setting a clear boundary that like, if it's an emergency, just call me. I'm here, but like, I'm generally not going to be available unless it is. So I think there's strategies like that. My team, we're a diverse group of people, like doing different things, doing kid pickup, having appointments, whatever it might be. I've always thought about, this kind of conversation, high expectations, optimal flexibility. And I think as a chief of staff, I think actually I just posted about this, like you can set that standard. You can figure out what does that look like for you while still being the person that is the right hand to the person who's called in like dire emergencies 24/7. So that's a little bit of context to my answer there, Christina.
Okay, so building on that for the next one, are chiefs of staff expected to be yes people to their CEO? Maggie, we'll stick with you here.
Yeah, and we differed on this. It's such a blanket statement. I really wanted to say no to like one part, so I'll just go into that. I don't think you can be a yes person when you are needing to challenge your leader or bring up something that's really important in terms of like a cultural or business perspective that maybe they're missing. However, I do think that you need to be kind of like on board with really anything and everything your CEO is deciding to prioritize, deciding to run after, deciding to implement. Like once decision is made, you're a yes person. You are out there to say, yep, let me get it done. I've got this. And they need to be able to rely on you as that yes person. I won't go into too much more detail here. I'll let Clara dive into that because I'm guessing she has some good components to the first part that I shared.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe where we're differing is like just definition of a yes person, right? And for me, like when I hear yes person, it's just like anything the CEO says, you say yes to, and that to me, I'm like, if you're doing that, then you are not being an effective chief of staff, right? Like
Yeah.
I
Agree.
always try to, you should operate with like the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the time, you and your CEO should be like, yep, we're on the same page. We're going to go ahead and do this. Like I would come to the same decision as you would because I know your thought process as an executive. 20% of the time, healthy pushback, and 20% of the time for that healthy pushback is when you actually voice it is really what I say. So a lot of chiefs of staff will come to me and they're like, well, should I be in the room? Should I be in the leadership room, for these things? And I say, yes, you do have a seat at the table, but you may not always have a voice at the table. And those are two very different things, right? And so you need to be there for the context, and you should be relatively, like I said, 80% of the time aligned with your principal on whatever projects are most important, on whatever initiatives need to be kicked off, on how to make a decision around a certain thing. But 20% of the time, you are going to have a little bit more information than your principal because you are working high-low. You are next to the executives, but you're also in the weeds talking to those individual contributors, those managers, those department heads. And you may have a little bit more information when it comes to something cultural or when it comes to something that is a little bit more tactical. And that's when you're going to want to push back. I think a chief of staff who just says yes to everything, you end up not being a true strategic partner to your CEO. You end up just becoming a yes man, which may sound good in theory, but your job is to help manage upwards and pull on the reins when necessary. And so that's why I'm saying, don't be a yes man. I don't think, anybody who's a yes man in any part of your life, I think, question that. But in particular with this role, being a true strategic partner to your executive means being a sounding board, means bringing things up that they may not have thought about, or giving them a more holistic picture of something that they may be missing.
Yeah, no surprise here. We're totally aligned. I love the 80-20 thought because that really does like kind of help the sort of consideration between what's the opposite of a yes person, right? It's like that antagonist, the person who's always challenging. That's not the chief of staff. You should have a healthy amount of that. So 80-20, I think, or whatever that might be for your leader, your experience level, your industry knowledge, like makes perfect sense. So love that.
Great. Okay, so we just have a few more left of those rapid fire questions that we're going to explore here. Clara, can a chief of staff be truly effective without a team to support them?
Yeah, so I said no for this one. And the reason I say that is because very rarely do I see chiefs of staff with direct reports. So that's how I'm interpreting a team beneath them, right? I mean, as a chief of staff, I think this is the greatest irony of the title, is that of staff does not actually mean you have any staff underneath you. But this is all very similar, I think, to what it looks like in the political setting, right? Like a chief of staff to a politician, they're not individually managing each person, but they are getting the entirety of the organization to row in the same direction. And so when it comes to a chief of staff, you're using a lot of soft power, you're using a lot of indirect influence. And while you may not be directly managing people, you're not responsible for their career growth, you're not helping them get promotions necessarily, you are still working with a team. I think it's very hard to do this job well without some sort of resource, right? Whether that's the power of the purse or having, people that you can rely on within the organization, which is why it's so important to build relationships early on with people that are in the organization who can help you get things across the finish line. But again, you will not be directly responsible for these people. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult sometimes to get people to help you out with certain initiatives.
Yeah. And just so to clarify here, Clara and I both answered, can a chief of staff be truly effective without direct reports? We said yes, a chief of staff can be effective without direct reports. So we agree on this one. I think I would add a few things. I think from all of my kind of anecdotal conversations and looking at a lot of survey results and research, I think about 30% of chiefs of staff have teams. I was on my own as a chief of staff first, and then I built a team of, slowly over like 11 months, added a person, added another person, and eventually had like 7 or 8 direct reports. And wow, I was so much more effective with a team. To Clara's point, it's like the resources there makes a big difference. Can they be effective without direct reports? Absolutely. There are so many things that you can take on and consider improving within your leader's back office as like a party of one. I mean, the rhythm of business, making sure the leader's prepared every time for everything they walk into, considering what engagements they participate in or what we say no to for that leader and why. Events, communications, like it just, the list goes on and on. Strategic planning kind of, is involved in the rhythm of business there, but there's a lot that a chief of staff can do without a team. But I absolutely believe that the right leader can be more effective with a team if they are leveraging their team in the right way. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback, and I think context here is important too, right? Maggie worked at a much, much larger organization than I did. I worked at a very early stage startup where we were 10 people when I started, 45 by the time I left. And so, and I worked at a highly technical organization too, where when I first started, everybody on the team other than the CEO and myself were engineers or scientists. And so, I ended up taking on a lot of the responsibilities. And at that stage, I would like to think, still effective without a team, right? We
Yeah.
we weren't hiring for other operations folks. The emphasis was on hiring engineers and things like that, versus at an organization like Maggie's, it's much more complicated, right? There are different lines of business. There's much more cross-functional pollination that's happening. And so building a team helped her be more effective in a way that would not have translated into the same kind of environment that I was in.
Oh, totally. And the businesses we run now. Like, yeah, nope, we're good right now. All right, love that.
Okay, pivoting to the next question, Maggie, does a chief of staff success depend on the CEO's leadership style?
Did we both answer yes to this? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah. I think that above everything else, I believe, Clara, you feel the same way, but above everything else, a CEO has to be all in on the chief of staff, meaning they have to give the chief of staff access to them, or there's just no way a chief of staff is going to be successful because they exist for that person. So, leadership style, yes, if you're a high performer and you're able to work through a lot of, hard things and buddy up with other people, and maybe like you have a bad CEO, like not a great CEO, bad CEO, but you can be besties with their EA and get a lot of like old, past historical knowledge. Like you can do things to overcome like the lack of access, which is very real, by the way. A lot of CEOs are not great leaders. So there are things you can do, right? Just named several, but how can you truly be effective if you don't have the access and the buy-in and just like that collaboration that is highly necessary for this position. A lot of the material that I write and put out and talk about is like that chief of staff, EA, and business leader, whether it's CEO, VP, whoever, it's kind of like three legs of a stool. And to function at the highest level, all three need to be, right in there collaborating together. Very well-oiled, well-processed, and systemized machine. When one of those legs is not there, his tool's not going to work at all. Maybe you can figure out how to fix it a little bit, but it's going to be really, really hard. So.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like you said, we both agreed on this. I think the leadership style of the CEO is so important here. And you talked about access. And I would say the other piece that I always recommend for CEOs to give to their chief of staff, two things: time and access, right? Like if you're not willing to spend time getting your chief of staff onboarded, walking them through your thought processes and your decision-making processes, they're not going to have enough information in order to go and do this job well. The leadership style piece is, there's no one right way to lead a company. I mean, there are better ways and there are maybe worser ways, but there's no one right way, right? Like I'll just put it that way. That being said, a CEO and executive have to be extremely self-aware of what exactly their leadership style is in order for their chief of staff to succeed as well. And part of this is like you as a chief of staff, as you're interviewing, understanding who this person is this somebody that you can build trust with? Is this somebody that you would want to work with? All of those questions, and you should be doing your due diligence throughout your interview process as well. So all that to say, if the leadership style of the executive you're working with is not somebody that you enjoy working with or that you like, you're not going to be as effective overall either, right? You're going to be fighting like an internal battle of do I even agree with how this person is leading the company? And that's going to make your life harder. And then you're going to feel like you're going to have to push back more than that 20% of the time that we talked about. You're going to feel like it's going to be 40% or 50% just because you don't agree with how they lead the company. So, and then the second part that I want to keep in mind too is that your executive is the person who's going to be determining what success looks like for you. So if you're unaligned on how they lead a company, they're going to be defining success in a way that is unaligned with how you might determine success as well. And so those two things, working together is what's going to make you successful. Yes, you can do a lot of work, but if that work is not recognized by your executive, then success is still negative, right? And so I think those are really important things to keep in mind. For anybody who's looking at chief of staff roles, think about who do you want to work with? What are managers you've worked with in the past that you're like, that was such a great leader. I felt like, everything that they did to empower their team, I really agree with. Those are the kinds of people that I want to work with, as opposed to, this is a company that I want to work for, and I don't know what the leadership style is. I think with a chief of staff job search, that's something that you need to focus on more than the overall product or, mission of the company is who is the leader at the top, at the kind of helm of the ship. And is this somebody that I would want to follow into all the nitty gritties and the ups and downs of an organization?
Great. Okay, so this last one, you both gave a very quick thumbs up. In fact, Maggie gave 2. Clara, going with you, does joining chief of staff communities and educational opportunities help your chances of landing the role?
Yes, I think Maggie and I will give as many thumbs up to this as possible. A chief of staff role is a lonely one by nature. It doesn't matter if you're at a 10-person org like me or you're at a multi-thousand person organization like Maggie was. There's nobody really like you at your organization. And so you don't have the same kind of peers that, let's say, if you're a software engineer, you have 10 other software engineers that you can commiserate with, talk with, brainstorm with, all of this. You don't have access to the same kind of mentorship resources at your company as well. And so you are going to have to go and find those mentors, those peers, that network through communities, through educational courses, find other people who are going through this same career journey as you and learn from each other. One of the first things I did when I was a chief of staff in my role was in the first 30, 60, 90 days, I would say, I was going around doing a listening tour at my company. But at the same time, I was reaching out to hundreds of other chiefs of staff on LinkedIn to ask them, what do you do in your job? This was my first time being a chief of staff. It was my CEO's first time having a chief of staff. Yes, we had a job description in front of me, but that job description is super vague. What does it mean to support leadership? Like, that can mean so many different things, within the day-to-day. And so it was so helpful for me to sit down. I bought everyone a virtual coffee. I sent them a gift card to Starbucks or something like that after and said, okay, what do you do? What does your day breakdown look like? How much time are you spending here, here, or here? How do you determine what your priorities are with your principal? What are things that you're doing at your stage of company that either I should be doing or I need to be forecasting ahead to think about so that the things that I set in place now are going to help scale to a Series B, a Series C, whatever it is later on? Those are all questions that I couldn't ask my CEO. He was figuring it out as much as I was, but also he hired me to come to him with these initiatives and with these brainstorms and things like that too. So, I spent a lot of time building out my own personal network of chiefs of staff, and that's why we now have a community called Ask a Chief of Staff. I think the best person to ask about how to be a good chief of staff are other chiefs of staff, other people who are going through this. And I truly believe that community accelerates careers. It's always going to be helpful for you to know other people who are going through a similar career path, people who are above or ahead of you, people who are behind, and using that collective knowledge, you're going to get ahead in any capacity.
Love that. You're getting some good shout outs in the chat. We love Clara. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, like hearing you talk about this, it brought me right back to my first chief of staff role. It was my first chief of staff job to a leader that had never had an official chief of staff. He led a business, like Claire's mentioned, a $14 billion business and 5,000 employees and multiple department heads. And what's interesting is there actually were chiefs of staff in other areas of the business. So I reported to one of the executive team members, and some of the other executive team members, there was like 18 at the time, also had chiefs of staff. But I still felt so alone. I had one friend who was a chief of staff, and she sent me like a template or a couple templates. I mean, she was so wonderful and helpful, but it was like, oh, try this for that meeting. And I'm like, wait, I need more. What do I do? Like, what am I trying to do here? Also, I was like, okay, rhythm of business. What is that? Like, what do these things mean? Like, how am I, okay, so the rhythm of the business, but what's the point? What are we trying to do here? Yeah, I felt totally alone, even though there were some other chiefs of staff in my company. And honestly, like that is why I built Nova Chief of Staff. Why do we all have to recreate the wheel every single time or invent the processes to prepare our leader or to drive that rhythm of business? Like everything we do is going to be tailored and customized based on the business we're supporting, based on the leader that we're supporting. That's who we are as strong chiefs of staff, as innovative and flexible people supporting business leaders. Like we are always going to tailor our approach and figure out, solutions to problems and all of that. But without community, without educational resources, it's just really pretty impossible to do. And I always like to say, like, chiefs of staff are people who figure it out. We figure it out. You will figure it out. And I have confidence that you will. And sometimes, as we've talked about, confidence is the hardest part of stepping into the role. We will figure it out. But I mean, the education exists for a reason. Like we built Nova to offer the structure and frameworks and confidence building and hands-on practice that chiefs of staff, in things that chiefs of staff do every day for this exact reason. The biggest feedback we get is that, okay, I have the confidence I can do this job and like the resources to set me up doing it. So I think we're totally aligned here, and yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing out there, and I think this is probably a very common thing that a lot of chiefs of staff come across, is that I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I don't know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Imposter syndrome, right, is like a huge thing that comes up often, or as I've been told by a coach before, imposter phenomenon syndrome makes it sound like we don't have control over it, right? And you're going to feel that way. But one thing that I like to keep in mind is that only high performers experience imposter phenomenon. So if you are feeling that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get found out, that I don't know what I'm doing, it probably means that you are going above and beyond, what it is that's already expected of you, and you have even higher expectations of yourself than the people around you. So that's one thing that I like to keep in mind, is that if you're experiencing imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, it's because you have set very high standards for yourself. If you want to combat that, find other people who are going through something similar so that you can commiserate, you can share. I mean, I know that sometimes in communities, people are like, it just felt like group therapy, and like just that alone was enough for me to feel a little bit more confident knowing that there are other people going through this. But also, don't be afraid to ask questions of your executive. Like, what are things I'm doing well, and what are things I'm not doing so well that I need to improve on? You can only improve on things if you know that there's something to be improved upon, right? And again, you set the expectations of what success are with your executive. So
Yeah.
if they're like, you're doing a great job, nothing is going to change, you can take that right at face value and share that with yourself, or keep it in a document. I like to keep a brag sheet of like anything anybody ever says that's like nice about me. And on the days that you feel a little less confidence, go back to that sheet and say like, okay, I am doing the right things. But if you want to get better, which we all do, ask for more feedback, ask for more what you can do better at. And your executive, again, if they're giving you that time and access and they want you to succeed, they're going to give you that information. Take that, use it, build upon it, share it with your community.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot lately, and it just came up again, that like, okay, yes, we need to be asking for feedback. We need to be doing all these things that Clara just said. But there's also this element of like, we don't know what we don't know. And our executive also doesn't know what a chief of staff should do a lot of the time, right? So to Clara's point, like, we can get all of feedback. We can build new tools and try to support the leader the way they think that they want to be supported, right? But most executives can't describe a chief of staff role. Unfortunately, we're out there on a mission, Clara and I, to change that. And also, we also don't know what we don't know. We don't some of us might not realize, like, oh, a chief of staff could be the person who is gatekeeping what engagements my leader goes to and is recommending what my leader attends or says no to. The chief of staff is the person that's going to put a heat map together of all the things internally that my leader's done and hasn't done, and see the gaps and recommend, if we're staying on the engagements thing, other engagements to go to internally. These are concepts and ideas and frameworks and tools that exist in community and in educational platforms like Nova, because it's a structure that's been built, and you can go and you can figure out, okay, what have I done and what haven't I done, and what could I do to add value, tweak it, make it your own, flexible approach, tailor it for your leader always. But you just don't know what you don't know. And I think that's why just education in general is so beneficial. So I think that's it for me on that one.
Okay, great. With just about 10 minutes left, I'm going to try and pull. This was a really popular theme from our attendees when they were submitting their questions. So I really want to make sure we get this one addressed. What's the best way to articulate the chief of staff role and establish trust when a new executive or CEO joins the organization? We have a lot of folks that are noticing that there's a need for a chief of staff, and they're struggling with how to position themselves into that role. Maggie, let's start with you on this.
So no existing chief of staff, but somebody in the company wants to position themselves for the chief of staff role that doesn't exist yet? Okay. Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, you've got to understand the role deeply and be able to articulate it. You need to be able to understand the value of the chief of staff role and the definition of your choosing of the chief of staff role. And then it really has to go like a couple clicks deeper into how can you add value to that leader and the team based on what that leader and that team needs and what you are best suited to solve, and positioning that as why you would make an excellent chief of staff. And, one click further, I don't want to take too much time in these last 10 minutes, would be if you're already in the environment and you're already filling in gaps and taking on strategic projects, consider talking about the strategic work that you're already doing and the impact of that work, and getting the buy-in from the leader or the team that work is really valuable, and then positioning yourself as wanting to do that work full time. And here's the other benefits of the work that like this that they will have. So I'll pass it over to Clara.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My camera literally froze and then came back as soon as you were done. I was like,
Woo!
I really hope my camera comes back here. So yes, I would say positioning yourself within a company, right? And I think there are a lot of questions about, like, how do I know whether my CEO needs a chief of staff, and then position yourself. This is part of being a chief of staff, is anticipating that need. And so if you are talking to, let's say, an executive at your company, and I like to do a listening tour regardless of whatever role, you're in. You don't only have to be a chief of staff to go around and talk to people. Introduce yourself, say, this is, who I am, this is what I do right now. And think about ways that you can start to contribute and put yourself in that chief of staff position before officially pitching the title, so that you can build up a roster and that brag sheet again, right, of things that you're already doing, so that when it comes time for you to officially pitch, it makes sense, right? I think the thing that I see a lot of chiefs of staff or people who are interested in being a chief of staff do is they're like, well, I'm a generalist. Like, I can do anything. Like, I can just go up to this executive and I can do anything for them. It sounds great in theory, but just imagine you're in that executive's position, right? Or I like to use the analogy, like, I have a broken arm. I go to a doctor, and what if the doctor told me, oh, I can do everything. I can run a blood tox screen for you. I can run, an allergy test. And you're like, that's great, but I have a broken arm. I need you to fix this right now, right? And so even though you have a big generalist skill set, there are specific problems that these executives are facing right now. Figure out what those problems are, and then figure out, okay, what in my arsenal of stuff that I've already done that I can apply to these problems and help them get that thing across the line. Help them, it can be low-hanging fruit that you're helping them with, quick wins, build that up into a larger strategic project. Or one thing that I've seen work very effectively is that you go to the executive that you want to work for. You tell them, I have 5 extra hours a week that I can dedicate to helping you do whatever it is, anything that I can help you with, what can I do for you? And create those opportunities, because the more that you put yourself out there as a solution, as opposed to me trying to figure out where you fit in the organization, the stronger of a chance they're going to actually start to see the value, so that when you bring up the chief of staff title, they're like, great, that sounds awesome. As long as you keep doing what you're doing for me, I don't the title is less important. I want the value that you're bringing to my organization, to my team, all of that.
Yeah. I think too, just to answer one other kind of component of this question that we both sort of spoke kind of adjacent to, is just some easy tells of if your executive needs a chief of staff. I would love for every executive to need a chief of staff, obviously, or to have one, but obviously they need funding, and they, probably need to be bigger than like 5 people, but like definitely chiefs of staff have been employee number 5, that is out there. It just depends on the leader. But the tells that a leader needs a chief of staff, they're constantly heads down in follow-up and execution. They're executing their own initiatives that could easily be passed off to somebody else who is high level and strategic. They are communicating their own cascades through like cascade of information, their own kind of like vision, mission, all of it throughout the organization themselves in various ways. You can communicate those things, 10 different ways. They're doing that. It's really the person who needs to spend more time on vision, growth, strategy, and leadership. Get their head up, thinking future forward, eyes up, future, thinking ahead. Those are the leaders that like really deeply need a chief of staff, and the tells that you can use to position your conversation based on what you're seeing from your leader.
Great. Okay, so we're coming close on time, so unfortunately it's going to be our last question. Should a COS be responsible for crafting and rolling out AI adoption roadmaps for an organization? And is that up to the chief of staff or someone else in the organization? Maggie, I'm going to start with you on this.
It's a great role for the chief of staff to step into. I know that Clara and I have both had Lawrence on from Ambient several times, and Lawrence and Nova, we've created a, how to build AI policy for your company. We have those resources available, just step by step, exactly how to do it within our free resource library. So we'll put the link in the chat. But why not, right? AI is one of the biggest, like major technological changes to hit us in decades. It'd be awesome for a chief of staff to be at the forefront of that, both for their career, but also because who's better to lead a cross-functional project than a chief of staff like this that has stakeholder involvement across a company, far-reaching implications, customer and employee, many considerations from legal to sales, right? Like that is chief of staff energy right there. So I say, yes, a chief of staff should absolutely jump on this, and check out some of our resources to help you get started if you need them.
Yep. Agreed there. I think a chief of staff is a perfect person to shepherd in AI transformation. It's a little bit of culture, right? It's a little bit of a cultural shift from maybe how you've done things before. Operationally, how does AI fit into your different operations, your different workflows, processes, things like that? And then strategy. I mean, AI is part of almost every organization's strategy now, right? If you're not using AI, you're going to get left behind. So it fits into all 3 of those buckets that we talked about. Depending on how big your organization is, right? Like that is going to affect who the right person is, right? You're definitely going to want to get your CTO involved if you're a tech heavy company and you're introducing AI within, the different work streams that maybe engineers are even using. If you have a chief innovation officer at your company, this could fall under their bucket too. But all that to say, a chief of staff covers everything and anything. So if there's no one at the company who's doing it, then you as a chief of staff should be doing it. This is one of those things that if your CEO is not talking about AI, or maybe people are using it, different people have different subscriptions to different things. This is a great time to do an AI audit and figure out what is everyone using, what should we be doing as an organization to get not even ahead of AI now. It's here. It's already here. So how can we best incorporate it into our organizations to make sure that we are using it in the most effective way possible? So yeah, I would definitely say if you are a chief of staff and you want to be that AI shepherd, what a great opportunity for you. What a great opportunity to learn an incredible skill set that is going to follow you for the rest of your career. And what an incredible initiative to put on your resume to say that you did this and rolled this out for your organization.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're both 2 thumbs up on that one. Okay. Well, we are really close to the top of the hour here. I wanted to say big thanks to Christina. You did an excellent job moderating with all these fast flying questions that we've never done a Nova chat like this before. So fun. We'll keep doing fun things like this. And I was just looking through the Q&A. There's a lot of questions on there that we didn't get to. Things like moving from EA to chief of staff. What should you do first as a chief of staff? How do you build buy-in with your leadership team? Like, I could go on and on. A lot of these topics Clara writes about. A lot of these topics I write about. Follow both of us on LinkedIn. Go to Nova's blog, novachiefofstaff.com/blog. Tons of topic like alignment here on a lot of our blogs. Clara as well on her, it's Substack, right? Your Substack and your Ask a Chief of Staff newsletter. Like, there's a lot of resources out there. You can totally find them. And we are so appreciative that you were on this call with us. So again, if you're interested in enrolling with Nova Chief of Staff in our certification course, we dive into the what of how to do all these Chief of Staff things, hands-on practice, all of it. We have a discount code for you, 150 off. Email us if you want to chat about anything. And Clara, thank you so much for being here. This was great. Any final words from you?
No, I think this was so fun. I enjoyed the hot takes portion and then being able to dive into everything a little bit more. I know that there's still a lot of questions in the Q&A. Maggie, if it's possible, if you can share those questions with me, I'd love to do like a rapid fire of like, if we have resources we can link to each question or just a quick 2-sentence answer. I'd love to answer everyone's questions and hope to get all connected with you on LinkedIn. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. Happy early weekend.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being here, and we will see you next time. Have a good one. Thanks, Clara.
Bye.
Bye.